story time, story time. This is, just a quick story of me just giving up an experience that I actually went through. And this is more so catered towards, the younger generation that's actually out there wilding, to give you something to think about, give you a part of, you know, the penitentiary that most really don't give a side of. Um, so this is going towards the ending of my release. I'm actually in Queensboro facility, and for those of y'all that you know never been incarcerated or did any time, um, there's a phase in your bid where you have to pretty much give an address to where you're going to be getting paroled to. You have to go through your counselors and situate, you know, all your paperwork as far as like parole, because parole is going to go, to your house, apartment, wherever it is that you're going to be staying at, being paroled to, or whatever the case may be. So this is about like a month before I'm actually released, right? And I'm actually undecided of where I'm going to go because I've been gone for a decade plus. Um, but I've been hearing stories from guys that been in and out on how to go about doing certain things. So I figured that, I'll utilize my mother's address, um, and not actually stay there. Just have an address on file for them to actually, let me out and for me to parole to, thinking that, you know, parole was gonna be just as easy as how people made it seem. Um, so this is what I ended up doing. Mind you, I'm in Queensboro. So I wrote my mother. Mind you, of course, I left the streets at a young age. I was about 19. And, again, a decade plus now, I'm writing my mother, asking her if I could utilize, her apartment for me to get paroled to so I could get released. Um, I had to go through like a tug of war of emotions to actually, bring myself to even ask her that because, of course, when you out in the streets and you getting money, the fast way or whatever, like that's what you're used to. So I wasn't living at home before I left the streets. So for me to like build up the courage and ask her if I could utilize her address was, it was a lot for me to go through, a lot of pride and stuff like that, etc., etc. So I ended up writing my mother, and I try to like explain it to her on, the process with the parole, what was going to be going on as far as them coming by to check on me and, you know, making sure I'm around for curfew. I don't know what made me think that I'll be able to utilize, the apartment and not actually live there when parole ended up checking up on me more times than not. Um, so I wrote my mother and asked her, like, can I use your address for parole? I'm not going to stay there. I just need an address so I can, like, you know, get out from here, whatever, because if I don't, and tell them that I want to go to the shelter, I'm gonna have to be here a little bit longer until they find a place, an actual spot for me in the shelter. So I sent the letter to my mother. She writes back. She's like, I don't think it's a good idea. You know, he was gone for a while. He was locked up for what he was locked up for, and she was basically telling me like, yo, ain't nothing happening. Like, she doesn't want me at the apartment or whatever the case may be. But it was strange at the time. My godmother, my god sister was actually staying with her two children. So my mother, inside of the letter, she definitely let me know like, well, I have your god sister here. She has two kids and da 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 da. And in my mind, I'm like, so what? Like, like I need this to come home. Or to make me come home on the actual date that I'm supposed to get released, as opposed to telling them that I'm going to the shelter and then I have to wait for placement in the shelter and then they'll send me home. Who knows how long that would take? A month after the release date, 2 months, something to that effect, 2 weeks, who knows? But I wanted to get released on a day that I know that I had the date to get released. So I write my mother back. So I'm asking, I'm like, now I'm thinking of it. I'm like, well, I'm coming home after doing all this time, and now I'm thinking kids. Like, how old are they? Like, are they boys? Are they girls? Ended up being a boy and a girl, and I'm like, oh Lord, like, automatically I was just nervous. Um, Definitely haven't been around children for 10 plus years, so it was just I'm just thinking of how I would take things in. I know they're gonna be looking at me like, oh, who's this big dude coming in there all of a sudden, or whatever the case may be. My mind is just going. So after a couple of letters back and forth with me and my mother, I decided like, you know what, I'm not gonna get paroled to the house. I don't want to get paroled to the house. Like, I'm good, because it's just too much for me to think of, like little kids and looking at me strange, and I may be coming home with like up north behavior. Everybody looking at me like I'm a weirdo, or things of that nature. So I ended up telling her like, yo, you know what, I'm good. And I remember going to my counselor and letting them know like I don't have an address for him. And they was like, really? They was like, well, why did you wait till so long? I was like, well, I was trying to situate, you know, my situation to see what it is that I can prepare for you guys, but it didn't go accordingly. You know what? I'm gonna backtrack. I'm not sure if it was Queensboro when they did that, or if it was in Cayuga before I left. It was. I'm pretty sure it was Queensboro. But long story short, right? No, it was Queensboro, if I remember correctly. So my counselor's like, okay, well, you know the process with that. We're gonna have to, look for placement for you, etc., etc. So your release date is 5/31. Um, you know, we just got to inform you that you may not be getting released on that day, because we have to find placement for you. It's nothing that you did or whatever the case may be. They giving me the whole shebang surrounding that whole process, being that I wasn't able to provide an address for them, right? So I'm like, cool. I'm going back to the dorms, regular programming and schedule, just walking back and forth like a zombie in Queensboro. And one day, the counselor, he comes down to the unit where I was locked at, and he was like, checking on the other, prisoners that was in there, whatever. And he came to me, he was like, yo, we need you to call your mother, like she wants you to call her, whatever the case may be. Now at that point, like I'm a little upset because now it's the reality is starting to set in. Like, yo, hold up, I gotta go to a shelter. Like, it wasn't sitting well with me. And I was upset. I was upset at my mother, but I should have been more upset with myself for putting myself in that position. But at the time, I was upset with my mother. Um, so when they told me that, she called up to the jail and she wanted me to call, I'm thinking, maybe they bugging because my mother isn't the type to, do all these calls and, you know, maybe like 2 days passed. The counselor came back down and, he's doing his job with checking up on prisoners and, just checking in on the guys and letting them know updates with addresses or whatever the case his job entails when it comes to him coming around the dorms and all that, right? So he comes to me again. He's like, no battle. Your mother called again. Like you didn't call her, and I'm like, nah, I'll call her. I'll call her a little bit later. I'm gonna call her though. But again, I'm like, yo, at this point, my mind is like, yo, f all that. Like, I ain't calling nobody. Like, I'm gonna put on my hard hat, just hold it down and go through what it is that I gotta go through the shelter and situate myself once I get released or whatever. Okay, the third and final time he came back around and he's like, yo, like, what's your deal? Like, um, your mother said that, you know, she wants you to get parole there, or whatever, but, you have to, reach out to her so, you can come back and let us know this, that, and the third without you letting us know what it is that your mother's trying to let you know, like, the process of you going to the shelter is gonna, proceed. So I'm like, what? All right, so I call her and, we had to talk. She gave me the, you my son regardless of what, and I'm like, yeah, like I thought I was your son, like when we spoke the last time, and I asked you this, like, you know, um, I couldn't understand it. It was one of those talks where it was just, when reality hit from, doing all that time, and you thinking your time is not gonna ever come for you to get released, and it's actually that time, and you got to think about like where you gonna go, and it's like, damn, hold up, where am I gonna go? Um, yeah, it makes you think. So, long story short, um, I went back, spoke with the counselor, and this is after the counselor like had to like persuade me into doing it because he seen the stubbornness in me. Like I wasn't trying to call the first two times that he told me about it or whatever. We spoke and we spoke and we spoke and we spoke, and I finally gave my mother a call, and we had that long talk, and I ended up going to see the counselor once again, and I actually gave him the address, and boom, like everything was like set to go. Um, so we get to May 31st, time for release that morning. I'm going through a lot of different emotions because I haven't seen the streets in 10 plus years. It's a long process of even getting out. If your peoples is there and in your life, they send you some clothes for you to actually come home. Shout out to my brother that sent my clothes to me. Shout out to Royale. Um, I got dressed. They gave me my property. I left with all my pictures and uh, books, some legal work. I left with that, and that was pretty much it. Um, they gave me my property. I waited up until they finished doing all the things that they needed to do. I think they gave me more paperwork on the way out, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe, matter of fact, yeah, they did. My post-release supervision papers, as far as like the rules and regulations that I would have to abide by um, when it comes to parole and what parole entails and all that good stuff. Um, they gave me my stuff, and at like a certain time, I'm not sure if it was 9, 10 o'clock or whatever. They cracked that gate, and boom, they let you out. Um, Now that feeling, that feeling I got once released, I remember like walking out the gate, um, and my people's were supposed to be outside the gate or whatever. For some reason, I didn't see them. But when I got outside the gate, I just looked up in the sky. And I don't know. I think I just started to get dizzy or whatever. Like I couldn't believe that I was out or whatever. And I just heard like, my people's calling me from like down the block, waving and waving and waving. And I looked, and I'm like, oh, wow. You know what? I looked at the facility. I'm like, man, it's time to go. It's time to get away from this. Um, you know, Jumped in the car, and the hugs and all that good stuff, and we was on the road. Um, Now the purpose of the story time, right, is because there's a lot of us that did time, in prison, lengthy amount of time in prison. Some of us learned the lesson, some of us didn't, or whatever. Some of us tell stories of how it is inside of the prison, the typical jail stories or whatever. But I chose to give you guys a part of the penitentiary that most didn't speak on or wouldn't speak on because it can be a little bit embarrassing. Um, you know, yeah, maybe that it can be embarrassing. I'm not embarrassed by it. I think by this storytelling right here, it'll just give some type of insight to you know all those that's out there like quote unquote thugging and bugging. Um, you know, this is something you could definitely think on after doing your time or doing all that time, depending on how much time you end up doing. Um, when it's time to come home, especially if you went away for over a decade and you used to actually living on your own, um, and pretty much doing a bit by yourself for the most part. And it gets to that point of your counselor asking for an address or whatever. It can get real, you know. I've known people that, and not to say that shelters is bad. It's just all the process, to help situate yourself. I was willing to go through the process of me being stubborn, um, but thank God that I didn't. Now, the purpose of me actually giving up the story time is, because my birthday was June 1st, a date after I got released. So, if I'm not mistaken, today's the 4th. So, I didn't even realize that it made 13 years, May 31st, that I've been home. So, I felt like it was something that I wanted to share with you guys. Um, yeah, it made 13 years since I've been home. Um, so, and I say that to say, like, the amount of time that I actually did in prison is the amount of time that I actually have on the streets. Thank God. And I definitely just want to, you know, bring some insight, um, when it comes to being incarcerated, doing time, something outside of the box than what most will actually bring. Um, I'm not gonna be talking about cuttings and all that craziness. We're definitely gonna like bring things more so to a head. So you know, hopefully the peoples won't be so much in a rush to actually go there, due to the criminal mentality, or associating yourselves with certain individuals, or maybe it ain't even an association. But for the most part, man, hope y'all take that in. It's a little funny now that I'm thinking back on it, as far as like where I directed my anger, which was towards my moms. But at the end of the day, it's like, nobody really owes you nothing once you actually put yourself in a predicament where you have to do time. So to all my young boys out there, man, even my OGs out there that can't seem to get it right or whatever the case may be. Some people are more fortunate than others. Um, this is something that you may want to think about when it comes to doing time, like sending home all the jail pics, all brolic and you know Aki and all that stuff. All of that is good, man, but there's some reality in there that most won't speak about, because it hurt. It cuts deep. Um, so I just wanted to share that with you guys, man, and definitely congratulate myself on actually being home for as long as I have, because I have no plans on going back. And hopefully, if anybody's actually watching this, you can utilize this as something to just fall back and think on, like, dang, like, definitely look forward to more substance on what it is that I have to provide when it comes to, this YouTube thing, man. I just advise for you guys to stay woke or wake up for the most part, you heard? I'll be good and take care, man. All right.